Hello everyone, I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Bianca.
And welcome back to the Preservice PODSQUAD podcast.
So today we're continuing last week's episode where we spoke to NJEA consultant Hannah Pawlak, and she, as we mentioned last week, is a former pre-service president and also a TCNJ alum, but she's currently teaching English and special education in Middlesex County. So we're excited to continue our conversation about applying to school districts. And,
I'm excited too. There's a lot to know about this topic, so I'm glad that we can just keep rolling.
Yes, there are so many more questions we have, so I'm glad that
we have a lot of questions.
Love
in
it.
session 2, So let's get this started,
Great.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a resume should typically be structured like? Or can we talk about resumes, period? Please?
Yeah, resumes are really interesting because they are what get you in the door for the interview. So a resume and the application together will decide truly, it's a representation of you on paper essentially, right? So it will decide if you get a resume or not, if you fit the district's needs or not. Sometimes it's nothing personal, sometimes it's you don't have a certification that they necessarily need, et cetera, but structure-wise for a resume, it really depends. Again, and I'm just speaking from my experience, but I do teach a vocational class, and how I always teach it to them is right at the top, you have your name, you have some, just doesn't have to be very personal information, but contact info. You want to give an email that is not your collegiate email, just a personal email. And can we please take a moment to know it can't be like, hiya baby 123 or like
have
my
you seen
who loves you
with crazy
yes
emails?
Oh my god, and we do think that's a little weird, not because we all have them, but if you want to put your my mom loves me email on there, that's great for maybe like a promotional email, right? When you sign up and but we're gonna do, you want to have a piece of your name in there or something like that. Very professional. If you wouldn't say it out loud to a boss, don't put it on a resume. So that's my email tidbit. I know I have seen people put their LinkedIn profiles on there now. Mm-hmm. So you'll see their LinkedIn, their email, and a contact phone number, to schedule something. I would suggest those things. It used to be we would see a lot of addresses. I don't think really necessary. But at the top, most commonly, you're going to see people put their school information, their graduate information, stuff like that. And I actually suggest not doing that. I would put that at the bottom of your resume. We do look at the whole thing. It's just what we want is your related experience. And we don't surf these resumes as thoroughly, at least in my district, as thoroughly as you would imagine. Yes, if you have some, as I call them, buzzwords, right? We're going to notice, but we definitely want the related experience at the top. That would mean your student teaching or clinical internship experience, and just list what you've done, your practicums, all of your direct experience within a school district. That would be definitely what I would say to put first.
I know a big question that people have, and that I have for myself. A lot of people say to just try to keep the resume to 1 page. Some people say it's okay to have 2 pages. What do you recommend with that?
We don't really judge 2 pages, but I would say 1 page front and back, because what happens is things are printed and stapled. And sometimes you don't really get that second page for no other reason than, it's just lost in the sauce. We all print stuff in a copier and things happen and we just don't get the second page. Do I suggest doing more than a front and back? No. Again, we're not gonna look at it scrutinize. We're going to definitely make sure you want it to be as professional as possible. So when I say this, just keep it professional, but you want to make sure everything's just on 1 page. A front and back is fine for education. You have a lot to add. Yeah.
About keeping it professional, though, what does professional look like? I guess if that's a reasonable question. Like, some people will include a picture of themselves on their resume. Do you think that's appropriate? And then a follow-up question, I'll ask you the follow-up actually after you answer the first question. But yeah, what do you think about including your picture on a resume? Or is that something maybe that they should judge you without seeing you?
It's definitely more portfolio-esque. Like, well, if we ever talk about portfolios, that's where I would keep the pictures to the portfolios. I think it's not very common to do that, and I think it would be a little jarring. You don't know who's going to judge you. I'm not a really big resume judger, so when I see a resume, I take it with, a grain of salt, because a piece of paper doesn't encompass a full person, in my opinion. And I don't think many people do think it does, but I do think you just have to keep in mind that you don't know who is going to be looking at it, and you don't know what, they're going to think about what professional is. So I would say keep it very standard. You don't Elle Woods it up. You know what I mean by that? Yeah. I wouldn't do that for no other reason than it may turn somebody off on the interview committee.
That was the follow-up question. It was like, because a lot of people have started using Canva now, and there's all these nice, like, pretty designs that are colorful, and like, is the visual appeal important? I guess is the real question. Because yes, Elle Woodsing it up would be like
fun,
pink resume. Like, yes, it's gonna look cute, but is that considered professional because it looks nice, or is that maybe something that might strike a nerve with some people?
Okay, so it's interesting that, so I would love an Elle Woods resume. That's my personal, like, I think it would be so fun and show some personality, like, off the paper, but I can't say everybody has the same view. So I would keep it almost as cookie cutter as possible. Not saying you can't add a border, but minimalist is where I would go with this. We had a discussion, actually. I was doing something, I advise this business club, and we were going through our state's, I guess, manuals, if you will, and all of the kids in New Jersey have to write these big old manuals, and they're really, really good, and they're really, really professional looking, like standardized professional, what you would think of when you think just buttoned up professional. When you go to nationals, things turn into a little more pictographic. So I was just having this discussion with my co-advisor. Should we pictograph it up, or should we just keep it as a standard cookie cutter model? And, it was interesting talking to some of the students. Some would actually consider the pictograph, which I would prefer to read, significantly more unprofessional than their standard, 20-page paper that they wrote. I wonder if professional is not the word, or if it's just, if standard is more of the word that we're looking for here. But I always suggest keeping it standard. You just don't know who's looking at it.
That's true.
You just don't know.
And what would you recommend for printing in color? I know people, I don't know if you should be doing like hot pink, but I know some people have done like a blue just to make it stand out a little bit. If you do add color, could it just be like the border at the top, or could you add some of the keywords in blue? Like, what might that look like?
I don't know if I would keyword in blue. But if you wanted to do like like this color, there's a navy blue tablecloth. I think it would be fine. Just know that most public schools don't have or don't print these things in color. So no matter what, you're going to have it printed in black and white. So it has to look good in black and white. Just grayscale it when you go to make a PDF to make sure everything looks good if you're going to do something like that. But a muted tone color, I really don't see anything wrong with that. And that's my personal, if you were to do that, I think it would look better if you did put some sort of minimalistic border in the same color on it, instead of just making the words a different color. I think that would be like, was it a typo?
Yeah.
Is
there ever a time where you're bringing your resume in for yourself, or they're always printing it out for you?
They print it out normally because they have the committee review it ahead of time.
Okay.
The committee doesn't really decide who gets an interview. It's just administration, right? So as they're looking at this, they'll be like, oh, okay, we want these people. They will be then printed out for the committee. What I always suggest doing, I know this is interview-esque, what I'm about to talk about, but is to make these almost mini portfolios for your interview, which would encompass then printed out resumes. I think every time somebody does that, it looks very prepared, and it's not as common as most people would think. And if you make one for yourself, you have very easy reference materials alongside your portfolio.
Can we talk a little bit about, like, beyond, the educational experience on the resume and the formatting, what are some key, sections to include in a resume? Like you mentioned before, relevant experience. If people have, volunteer experience, is that, separate from work experience? Where do internships fall in? What are some general sections that people could incorporate?
Yeah, so I would actually separate related experience and work experience.
Okay.
So that's definitely one thing. Definitely work experience would be all of your in-school-based stuff. Related experience would be those clubs and organizations and maybe second jobs that you have. Those are really important. You can learn a lot or about somebody based on what they were involved in, and I think that's a really interesting thing to add. Special skills, if you have room. If you have, maybe a Google certification, that would stand out. That's not something that a lot of people have. Speak another language, something like that. Have you traveled abroad? Definitely put that on your resume. You want to highlight that. You could have, it depends how many, I know a lot of people have a lot of jobs. You could even add your own, other professional section if you want to just put, I had a few jobs in college, all kinds of different things. But that's where you put your, if you had to choose between tutoring, waitressing, and teaching fitness classes, I would move waitressing to the bottom because two of them are education teaching related.
And so,
yeah.
I know some people have put on the resumes in the past, I've seen a skills category, and so they'll just list things like organized, good communicator. Is that something you should be putting on it because it's not necessarily demonstrating how you do those things? Or if you're just trying to fill space, is that something that you should have on that?
I truly think that's a space filler. Every time I see that, it's not I would separate it as what other certifications. That's a good one. Honors and awards. That's a good section to have if you have scholarships or whatever. But when I see people list their personality traits, I don't hate it. You could tell me what you think, but I'm not going to add a lot of weight to seeing that. It's just, I've seen that too. I think it's different than a skill set. Being organized, is it a skill? It is, but I also think it's inherent sometimes to people's personalities. If it could be a personality trait, I would steer clear. But I have seen organized comes up a lot. Creative, that's another one. Yeah. And it's, I don't know if I would, I feel like I would rather see another bullet point on what you did in your experiences, or maybe even explain a little bit about your other clubs, than hear that you're creative.
I think if someone's very set on including those things, it's better just to talk about it in the interview and say, I'm a very organized person. These are the examples of how I'm organized, and build off of what you already have on the resume with concrete examples. So
yeah, that would be a great way to do it. You could even highlight it embed it within the resume. So if you were, I don't know, instead of saying that you're an organized person, maybe you could, in one of your field placements, you did something to demonstrate that skill that you're really proud of. That would be a bullet point. But you don't want to add more bullet points to other things than you do your last clinical internship, student teaching experience, that should be the longest, if you will, section. If you have 4 bullet points for that, don't go over 4 for anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna
That's a
ask
good
you,
rule
like,
of thumb, yeah.
how many
Yeah.
bullet points? But 4 seems like a good amount.
It depends on how long your resume is. And you also don't want to, like, let's say you have a front and back, you don't want to,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, make sure that the section is finished on the
Before we
page.
move on to the next page.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Yes.
Moving back to what you said about abroad experiences, I've seen that some people put that like under education, like their education at whatever college or university they're at, or sometimes they'll also put it as like related experiences. Do you feel like there's a better spot to put an abroad experience? Because I know like a lot of students will study abroad even if it's not like related to education necessarily. They'll go away for a semester or something.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you want to highlight. Personally, I do think you would see it more if you put it within where you have your degrees and certifications.
Okay.
That's where it really stands out. I think it makes it a little different. But if you want to embed it somewhere else, you could. I don't think it's bad. It's just you miss a lot. There's so much writing on it that you don't. Every little bullet point is probably not going to be read, but you want, when they are read, for them to be solid.
Speaking of the bullet points, I took a class in high school where we did a unit on creating a resume, and a tip that they gave was to try to put numbers in the bullet points to have like a numerical value to the things you're doing, and numbers could also visually help make things stand out. So you do think numbers are good to use, and then if you do use a number, should it be like 42 or should you be writing out 42 if that's the number, for example?
I always think it's more standardly professional to write out a number.
Okay.
But I've never looked at a resume and was impressed that they added numbers. I don't even know in what context. I guess maybe you had a class of X amount of students. Is that in what kind of?
I think the example was like for service hours, people would put achieved over 100 service hours, something like that. Or say you hosted an event and you had an X amount of participants come to the event. Just to kind of give context as to how large something was.
It would add context. And I think that's it's fine. But if you're going to do that, I think it would be very bizarre to do something like 42.
Right.
I think it should, let's round it out a little bit. Give us 45.
Okay, a solid number.
Yeah, like give it something in 5s at least. And I wouldn't overdo that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Multiples of 5 and 10. Got it.
Yeah, I just think it would look like, I feel like if I saw too many numbers in a resume, I would find it different.
Got it.
Yeah.
So maybe 1 or 2 here and there just to provide
Yes.
context, but not every single bullet.
If you needed to, absolutely. If you really think it would enhance the resume, yeah, let us know. Reasonably.
Right.
Makes sense. So shifting gears a little bit, maybe this is an especially important question for students who are starting their college experience and, kind of finding their place in different organizations on campus. So we're wondering, does participating in Greek life look good on a resume? And, should someone go after that sorority, or does it look better to have a different kind of experience? And if so, what is that experience? Or what is the perspective on Greek life here in resumes?
So I'm going to just, I could speak for myself when I say this, and I don't think there's a problem with adding it, and I don't think there's a problem with not adding it. I do think Greek life lends itself to plenty of philanthropic activities that you could definitely elaborate on within your interview and even on your resume. I think if you hit the right person, let's say you're in the same sorority or same fraternity, that does resonate with people. To everybody else who isn't in a sorority and fraternity, I really wasn't. So to me, it just it's a college, it looks to me like a college thing. I know there are post-collegiate sororities and fraternities, but it doesn't sway me one way or the other. It's what did you do with it? If it's between that and on the tennis team, whatever. Or if it's between that and another club, whatever. It just, to me, seems like another college experience you had. Everything on your resume, though, should be strategic. So if you can't speak to it, and if it's not going to be a big part of your, interview, and it wasn't a big part of your collegiate experience and your professional experience, don't put it. So if you were in a sorority, and let's say somebody else is in the same sorority and they're interviewing you, you need to talk about that sorority. Like, they will probably tell you, and you need to be like, oh, I did XYZ, not like, I was there for a semester and it was fun. Be relevant about it.
I see.
Yeah.
Because that's something that, like you said, that stuck out to me that you said strategic, because if you're going to be putting something on a resume and, like you said, you can't speak to it, I feel like that just does not, like, show that, like, you more about your character. It just didn't add any value to, your application. So that stuck out in my brain majorly, that word strategic.
Yeah, you gotta use it. Because we do ask about stuff. A lot of times the administrator will be like, does anyone else have any other questions? That's when we pull from the resume a lot of times.
Okay.
Questions are pretty standard and set. So we ask the same thing to each person. Except if we hear something or see something on the resume that we would like to further elaborate on.
Sort of with that same idea we mentioned before, bringing your resume to the interview, and you said you might have it in front of you.
Yes.
It would be best to not be looking at the resume when they ask you questions about your resume, right? You should be able to speak to everything without having to look down at the paper.
Yes, but you can reference it. So if you're going to bring a resume, a mini portfolio, a full portfolio, yes, and all those things, right? You should be referencing them. So let's say there was something on your resume. You do need to know it back and forth. I hear what you're saying. Know it. But if somebody is asking a question about, okay, can you give me something you're learning in class or something? Like a topic.
I'm in a history class right now. We're talking about the Holocaust.
Okay, so let's say somebody is asking you about your experience teaching the Holocaust to middle school students. You might be like, oh, you can see on my resume right here that I did this, XYZ.
So sort of bring everyone else in the room to look at what you're looking at, in a sense.
Yeah, so if you're going to look at that is how you use your materials within within the interview. You can use the resume, and sometimes, because we don't, we're just looking at them, we may have missed something, so bring it to us. For sure.
It for the community.
Yeah, as you're speaking, that'd be nice. Yeah,
that's good.
I would love that. When people do that, it's really nice.
Yeah. With different activities, how would you say, aside from Greek life, but more so towards leadership, how do you think that being an NJEA pre-service member looks on the resume? And in your district, if you have seen applicants come in with that, that experience, what is it look like, especially since you're involved in the union, maybe with your coworkers who are not involved in the union, what do people think about that?
It's interesting. So we don't have a lot of potential members in my district. We actually only have a very, very few, which is great, and is something that I would encourage you to look into as you apply for jobs, because you want a nice, strong union to make sure that your jobs are protected, you have access to knowledge and benefits. I have seen people come in with NJEA pre-service on their resume, and I do think where you put it is different for other people. So, for example, I know in my resume, and this was specific to me, because you don't have to go through a very standardized format, but I did have a leadership category. I put it there. I assume you guys would as well. If you are a member of NJEA pre-service and you're a rank and file member, and it's great, you do what you want to do, but you haven't stepped up into any leadership opportunities, that's cool too. I would put it under some sort of, if you were doing certifications and organizations that you're part of, I would just plop it under there. It's important because the people on your committee will know what that is. So unlike a sorority, which is fine and great to put on there, I relate to NJEA because I'm currently part of it. You're part of it as a pre-service member, you're part of it as a full-time member, and you're part of it as you retire. So it follows you, which is so important. And it's one of the only things that really does. For example, I don't know, let's take History Club, right? History Club is awesome. And I think it adds value while you're in college to whatever college experience that you're going through. But it stops there. And NJEA pre-service doesn't. It just evolves into something that meets your needs in a different way.
Okay, that's great advice. In that same sense of choosing sort of which positions you want to include, say for example, I'm president of the education club on campus, history club on campus, and that's related to my major, but say I'm also on the executive board of more of an interest-based club, like for example, outdoors club. Is it looked down upon to include things that don't relate to your major, or should you sort of put everything on there?
You can put things on there that aren't 100% like directly related. You may just find camaraderie with somebody in the interview, I guess, committee. Just be strategic about it. You don't want more of that than you do. Right. It's a professional experience. You're getting hired for a profession. So you want to make sure that that's at the forefront. And then, oh yeah, by the way, this is fun about me. I was doing this, or I was in cross country, or I don't know, whatever you did, botany club. Just looking at that plant. That cactus is just calling to me. So, those are what you really want to put those on in other experience. Not that you couldn't add them. Moderate how much.
What if you were part of different conferences? I know a lot of pre-service members go to convention. Is that something you didn't no pre-service member really presents at convention or is somehow, private, but they do attend and go to those workshops. So do you think it's important to mention that you've been to convention and maybe list workshops that you attended, or is it really something that they'll just be like, okay, convention, sure, you went to, how do you see that?
So that's interesting, and I have seen this before.
Okay.
So when you're listing any kind of professional learning, or some people call it professional development opportunities, I just wouldn't.
Okay.
I just wouldn't. You will be asked about them more likely than not. So if you are there and you have, I don't know, you went to a universal design for learning workshop, let's say, you better know how to speak and implement that, because they will ask about that. And why wouldn't we? It's highlighted on your resume. If you want to talk about going to convention or going to Winter Lead or going to any of the other conferences offered, that's great. In a little bullet point underneath, was able to attend, whatever. Mm-hmm. But don't list specific workshops unless it meant something, you used this. And even then, I would embed it somewhere else if you really used it, maybe in your actual, work-related experiences. Yeah, I've seen that before, and that goes downhill real fast, especially if the committee has another idea what it should be from what you... it really depends on the workshop.
For a lot of those PD sessions, I know a lot of them give out certificates.
Yes.
So are the certificates something you should be including in your portfolio?
I would 100% include that in your portfolio.
Okay.
Yeah, that is different than putting it directly on your resume. If you need to fill room on your resume, add some related skills. Don't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not the organized thing, but the second language kind of ordeal. Yeah.
Should we also be including scholarships on a resume, or?
Yes, I put that in honors and awards.
In honors and awards, okay.
Yeah, that's how I personally do it, and I put that on my resume and how I have my students do it. I put their collegiate stuff last. We know what it is because you put it on the application. So you fill out this application, and then we have your resume, so we know what you're applying for and we know what you do, and a lot of times it's on there already. So that's why I don't concern don't concern yourself too much with that, which is why I put it at the bottom. I put honors and awards right above it.
Just listed or with a description too? Like, can you just say the name of the scholarship and that's sufficient?
You
or
can.
do you need a description of like why you earned that award?
You could do either.
Okay.
It really depends. I don't think I described mine. I put that in the year. I would refrain from things from high school, is what I would say.
I was just going to ask, how far back can you go? Obviously, if you're a graduating senior from college,
Yes.
freshman year's okay to still include, but any further back than that, you probably should refrain from that.
Yeah, it really depends on how much you've done. I don't even think I had anything from freshman year on there unless it was, let's say I was part of TCNJ's, NJEA organization. I would put from freshman year to senior year is how I would list it, but I don't.
And you would put the actual year numbers. Like, I was a freshman in 2022.
Yes.
So from like 2022 to 2026, I'll be a member of that club. So I would put that.
You can, or you can do. So I did a lot of months and years that's how I organize myself. You could do whatever you feel like you want to do, but you can also do to present.
I've done that too.
Yeah. That's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Within the application as a whole, like
Yes.
beyond the resume, what do school districts view as a strength?
Okay, so
overall?
this is interesting. The application is really seen by the administration,
Okay.
and when you're applying to colleges and there is the Common App.
Oh my god, that just brought me back.
Oh yeah, sorry. We hashed some trauma. We all did it. We all did the Common App, and it was a beautiful, horrific thing.
I was gonna say beautiful.
It was, because you know what? You didn't have to fill out this
That's
different.
true.
Yes.
That is true. Okay.
When you look at it like that, it was beautiful, but it took a lot of time, and it was, soul sucking in many ways. I would consider the application for teaching and any sort of educational professional to be very similar. It is a Common App, pretty much, around New Jersey.
Okay.
So you have a common application, yay, nay, right? It's through a system called Track. Apple with no E, I believe, if I remember correctly. And
I think you're right.
it is, right?
Yeah, I've tried to apply for like a sub position and you're correct.
From Track, and it has all of these positions listed. So what you would do is you would research. Let's say you live right here in Trenton. You would research districts that are in XYZ radius, make a list, and search them in Track. Once you do that, you will see, like, let's say Trenton, you live in Trenton and you want to work in Trenton. You'll see, if you look up Trenton Public Schools, that there's a whole bunch of open positions. Maybe, I don't know, I didn't do this recently, but I'm assuming with the current climate, I'm going to assume that there's,
Probably.
yeah, come May, there'll be some open positions. And what you can do is you can apply for those positions through this Common App. You make a profile. When you log in, your Common App is there. The difference is you will have, just like the Common App, sometimes, you know how some colleges asked, occasionally they would have a different questionnaire, or they would want a different essay, just to be special.
Supplemental.
Supplemental. Yeah. Optional, but is it? I would say it's not, and I would say the same thing here. So you will have some districts that do put different questions on there. And, you fill out the Common App, and as you go through each one for each district, you got to go through, not have to fill it out again, but you got to click through, make sure there's nothing different in each one of them. If I recall, and don't quote me on this, I think you can, if you had a district, you can pick the different positions you wanted, almost checkbox like, but don't quote me. I think that is what I did though. And what I suggest is, because some districts do ask different things, is copy the question, put it on a Google Doc, write that answer in a Google Doc, Microsoft Word, whatever document thing you want to do, pages, whatever. And just keep it there, because another district might ask the same thing. So you'll see that. And some people were kicking themselves because they would go through 5 extra questions and they're like, next application, oh my God, there's 3 of the same questions I just answered, but it's not part of the Common App. It's just extra. And that's where you upload your resume, and all the different stuff is on this system.
So
That's how I did my college applications. I kind of put all the supplemental essays on a separate Google Doc, and then you work from there, and then I went back in and just copied and pasted everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what kind of questions are they asking for these supplemental questions? What do those look like?
Okay, so to be honest, I would have to get out my laptop to really look at the ones that they asked, but it may ask you about your personal values, right? And to be very transparent, I haven't seen, my district doesn't show the committee the application. They just, show us the resume and the letters of recommendation. But they may ask you about your values. They may ask you what you feel your personal strengths are. They can ask you honestly anything. And how much you write is really up to you. I suggest at least a solid paragraph or 2 per question. Doesn't have to be a full essay, but I would write incomplete edited sentences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Without any sort of text language
Can you imagine? Abbreviation.
Honestly, I bet it happens. Because we've seen it on resumes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because people just type them up and don't really think much about it. Or we've seen, another resume faux pas is when they have, I always suggest leaving out an objective. I think it's very outdated when you have they used to have this little objective blurb at the top, what you're looking for. We know what you're looking for, but people would write in there the wrong objective with the wrong school district, and we'd be like, oh, that's awkward. Awkward. Yeah.
Do that with college essays. They'll submit an essay, but it'll say the wrong school's name.
Oh, no.
You better hope they're just skimming that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't realize it until, obviously, because we don't see the application and we get the resume, it just, whoops, it slipped through the administration's fingers, but now we're all looking at it no thanks. Just, it doesn't seem like you took the time
to look very carefully.
Yeah, it just seems like we know that school districts know they're an option. We know we're an option, and you're probably applying to other places. And I personally would encourage it, but we don't want to hear about that. We want to pretend we're the only ones. We're special. So.
Speaking of the application and filling out the essay questions, it seems like it's somewhat time consuming. So at what point in the year do you recommend, it's probably seniors, but there could be other people applying. So at what point in the year do you recommend people start working through that application if they're trying to get a job in the fall?
Probably once you're ready to apply. And I say that because if you start any earlier, let's say you started fall semester of your senior year, but you're not graduating till May, you have so many other things that you're probably leaving out in this application. It takes a minute. And it's, honestly, I'm thankful that we only really have to do, you only have to fill out your email one time and all again, professional. But you only have to fill all these things out one time, but it does take a hot second. Just work on it for a solid week. You may not even need that much time. And then the different districts ask their different things, but I would not start early.
That's a good piece of advice. I feel like I always start things super early.
I know, I get it. I do get it. Unless you're planning on not moving, not changing, not adding anything to your resume, not adding anything to your experiences, You want to make it as current as possible.
Yeah, and if someone's doing their clinical 1 and clinical 2 in senior year,
Yeah.
then you would want to reference that type of stuff on your resume, so you should probably
Yes.
wait until you actually have those experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, we want your most recent impactful experiences. So any kind of internship, student teaching, the big hurrah, whatever that means for all other education majors, that's what we want. Were you a para? If you're a para, please put that down. That's really important. Stuff like that.
Another question we had was about substitute teaching. So say
Yes.
someone does have their subcert, they've been subbing for the past 2 years, where would that go on the resume? Is that something that's valued to have on the resume?
I would say so. It just shows that you're in school districts. It also, I would put it in the certification and skills, whatever you want to call it. Word it nicely so it reflects you. But that's where you would put your CPR cert, or if you're exercise whatever certified. I don't know what that's called, but any certificate kind of would go in something like that. But in subbing, I did it and hated it. But it's not for everybody, and it was not for me. I love teaching. I hated subbing. Some people love subbing and love teaching. But it does get you a really good relationship with the district. If there's a district that you really want, my honest suggestion is to pinpoint 1 or 2 and sub there consistently. They will know you. They will, I want to highlight and emphasize, italicize, bold, underline the if, because you can't just show up and have people, well, we are appreciative, but are you a body in the room, or are you a active contributor? Contributing what you can. We're not saying that you have to, we know what our kids are like when we're gone, and we're not expecting wizardry, but you want to make sure you're making a good impression with the staff there. Sit in the teacher's lounge or educator's lounge. Speak to some people, make some connections, talk to the secretarial staff and the administrative assistants, say hi to the custodial staff, say hi to the principal. Those are all things you could do to really get yourself an in. And we have hired so many people from subbing. You get some really good subs that are just there consistently. Definitely suggest subbing, even if you're like me and just drudging through it. It just really didn't feel like my space. I had a problem with it, and it wasn't my space. But it was worth it to get a vibe of the different districts.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially
Reach
since
out
you're
there.
right there. Beyond just also making connections with teachers, though, I feel like the students themselves will give you a pretty good idea of if this school is a good fit for you, or if it's something that maybe you don't feel like this is the right community, and you can kind of do some trial and error too.
Yeah, and if you're not feeling it's the right community, it won't be when you get a job either. I can promise you that. I know. And nothing magical happens when you sub. Yeah, you should probably branch out and then pinpoint. It's a worthwhile experience, and you will see some things. The more you're there, the more you see.
Absolutely. So subbing is a great way to find out the climate of the district and the school, and to see if it would be a good fit for you. What are some other ways that you could do your background research on a school or district to see if you would fit there?
I really think a lot of NJEA conferences are heavily discounted for pre-service members. Mm-hmm. And I really, truly encourage you to take advantage of it, because you will hear the good, bad, ugly, great, surprising, everything right out of the mouths of the staff, your future colleagues. It's amazing for a pre-service member. It is just unfiltered glory that you can sit, you're just gonna sit there and take in that knowledge. It's invaluable. And it's as close to a real, your own personal experience as you can get. If you can't be there in the building, but you just wanna know, just ask people at these conferences and they're gonna tell you what's fantastic, who they love, what they maybe would change. And I think that would be my number one thing if I had to just, how would you research on that? We tell you to go on the website. Always good to know. Look at the strategic goals and planning and district-wide goals and make sure you know those. Definitely on the board stuff. Look at it. But it's going to be nothing compared to just speaking to potentially your future colleagues.
That's really helpful because I went to convention this past year and I spoke with a lot of people.
Oh, you did?
People
You did.
like to talk about, their experiences, where they're at. And I mean, I had a conversation with one man for like a half hour, 45 minutes, just all about where he was at in his school. So all that is very valuable and that's something that pre-service members can take advantage of.
Yeah.
Every time I do a presentation, I always tell people that, like, I will tell them, it's like, if you want to know more about districts, I promise you, teachers have no problem telling you that you just need
And they're
to.
honest too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's not only, like, the bad stuff, it's also, like, good stuff. Like, it's all
Yes.
around everything, and it just adds so much more perspective from someone who's physically there and has the job that you're looking for. And it's great because sometimes they ask for your perspective too, like, just ask you to contribute, like, what it's like at your college and university, and maybe, like, just trying to help themselves out too and, like, figure out what is the best to do in the situation that they're experiencing. So I always tell people that, I'm like, there's teacher drama in all these districts.
Yes.
They will be honest with you about the good, the bad, the things that need improvement, and, like, what they're doing in their school districts to make student life better.
Yeah, and it's all about your phrasing of the question, right? So I suggest when you go in there, you want to know what they like about it, say, what do you love about your district? Why do you like working there? Instead of, what do you think about
Yeah.
I always think you should go in for the positive. There's a lot of positives about each district and about public education that when you get, okay, let me frame something. This is our day job. We love it. It is, when people say it's a work of art, it is nothing short of that. And we are there every single day and we do a lot, and just like any job, it can be quite exhausting. So when you're just asking somebody who's doing that every single day, who's also doing this on a weekend, what they think, you may encounter just all of these, like, a plethora of kind of things, which is why, because it's not always true. Just what somebody's feeling, not what they're saying is untrue, but it's not the whole picture. So frame your questions wisely. Ask them what they really love about it. What's your favorite part? Because our first, I think, just as humanity's first instinct is, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, no matter from what. Doesn't matter if it's from the job or not, and therefore it could put you in a mindset that isn't as broad as your true experience is. Definitely word your questions wisely.
Yeah, and I would say take it with a grain of salt. It's just like growing up, if you had an older sibling or friend who had a teacher and you ask about them, they might say some not so great things, but I always was just like, I'm going to go in with my own perspective. I'm not going to be influenced by other people's experiences. So obviously what they're saying is very valuable, and we're saying it's a great tool to find out about the district, but you can go in kind of with your own perspective too. So I think that's something important to note.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that it's a great starting point. Like, if you're really, let's say, a sophomore, you're a second year student, you really have not had much exposure with different school districts yet, coming out to things like convention or other conferences can be a great opportunity to just get some headway in there.
Absolutely.
Additionally, if you wanted to do something else as a pre-service member, and this would, just like the conferences are exclusive to pre-service members, this would be as well, if you wanted to reach out to NJEA Preservice and say, hey, here are some districts that I'm looking at currently, they may be able to connect you with the local NJEA at whatever district that is, which could give you some further insights.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I can't guarantee, I can't make promises for people. So I can't guarantee that if you email somebody, they're going to respond back. But honestly, a lot of times they might, especially if you're registered as a pre-service member and you put that in your email. And if you give your 6-digit PIN, you will probably, I think you're very likely to get a response when they know that you're coming in with pre-service. I really think that's very positive. You'll learn a lot more than a website, let me tell you.
Okay, this was a great conversation and it was super helpful. I found so much of it helpful. I'm sure Bianca found a lot of it helpful. I hope everyone else found at least a good tip that they, take away from this into their own process. We want to, leave everyone with one last big overarching piece of advice. There's a lot here.
There's a lot.
So if you could sort of sum it up into just a few sentences, what would you like to send our audience off with?
What I think I would say is edit and revise your resume and application and tailor it to your district, and have somebody else read it over as well. I'm just going to leave that there because that could mean so many things. Just please edit and revise.
No, that's a fair piece.
Yeah, that's honestly one of the biggest things that'll prevent you from even getting the interview. Yeah.
And I think that's part of what we were talking about today is just, making sure that everything is tight and that you are ready to speak towards something, right, that's on your resume, or making sure that everything that you look at is fully prepared when you approach that interview committee. But yeah, thank you for joining us today and giving us all that advice.
So much.
That was, like Chelsea said, that was helpful for me too. And I think that listeners will benefit for this. And I hope in our third session we'll be able to talk about, different school districts and the teaching portfolio. And
yes. It's so much fun.
Yes. But it's something that I think a lot of people have questions about, so I'm glad you came in to address it with us because that sort of settled me a little bit more. I probably still will go back home and think of 20 more million questions, but I do have some more answers now is what the main point is.
We'll be watching this video back. I'll be watching this back in year and a half.
What did I say? Yeah. What did Hannah say?
You can always text me.
Okay.
You guys.
But thank you. And definitely as a reminder to everyone, just to make sure that you are preparing yourself as much as possible. You are doing the research necessary to look at school districts that you might be interested in. Come out to Teachers Convention or different NJEA conferences if you want to know more, if you want to just learn more about people who are already in the position you might be looking to apply for. And just to be open-minded about the future and flexible, being flexible towards your goals and where you want to end up. But yes, thank you, Hannah.
Of course.
Chelsea, thank you. We all did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We're so happy that you were able to come, and we're looking forward to the next season of this.
Woohoo!
Yes. Thank you to everyone who listened today. We hope that this was another little helpful resource to your journey to becoming an educator. And we are so excited to have you guys join us next week for an episode about teaching portfolios and finding the right school district, finding the right fit.
Yes.
So thank you, everyone. Happy Thursday.